They called it the rain that killed. Storms that didn't just fall, they devoured. In World War II, the ground itself became an enemy. Trench lines vanished under rivers of mud. Boots sank so deep that soldiers joked the earth was trying to drag them under. Canvas tents collapsed under their own soaked weight. Rifles rusted before they could fire. It wasn't just uncomfortable, it was lethal. Cold and wet killed as many men as bullets. Yet somehow, in that brutal chaos, a few soldiers found a way to stay dry, warm, and nearly invisible to the enemy. No factory gear, no special issue, just raw field genius born out of desperation. They called it the sealed earth method, and it was nothing short of a battlefield miracle. Every army in World War II fought two enemies, the opposing side and the weather. The Western Front was a swamp masquerading as farmland. The Russian plains, a frozen bog for half the year and a liquid pit for the rest. In Italy, rain turned mountain roads into avalanches of sludge. Canvas and tarpaulin, the soldiers' supposed lifelines, were useless. They ripped, sagged, and soaked through faster than they could be replaced. When a man's shelter collapsed, his morale often went with it. Wet uniforms clung to skin, breeding disease, food spoiled, equipment corroded. Dry became a fantasy. Yet while most cursed the sky, a handful of soldiers began to notice something strange. The crude clay ovens they built for cooking somehow stayed dry inside, even during the worst downpours. Those makeshift ovens became the blueprint for one of the smartest survival tricks of the entire war. You see, the soldiers realized that clay didn't resist water. It worked with it. When rain hit the surface, the clay would swell, sealing microscopic cracks and creating a watertight shell. And when the weather dried, it hardened again, maintaining its shape. The process was as raw as it was brilliant. Soldiers would start by bending green branches, willow or hazel, into an arched frame. These weren't fancy supports, just flexible, living wood with enough give to handle weight. Over that they slapped on a thick coat of wet clay mixed with fine wood ash. That ash was the secret sauce. It helped the clay dry tighter and denser, sucking out excess moisture and creating a fire-resistant layer. Next came the magic layer, old fabric or canvas, brushed with melted wax or even animal fat. It didn't matter if it came from a ruined tent or an extra shirt. Once the wax soaked through, it became a waterproof skin that repelled rain like oil on water. Finally, they added a second coat of clay mixed with straw or grass. The straw strengthened the structure, while the soil disguised it from enemy eyes. The result looked like nothing more than a natural mound, but inside it was bone dry. Soldiers described sitting through days of rain in relative comfort, while neighbouring units practically swam in their trenches. What those men created, without ever realizing it, was a masterclass in material science, a perfect balance between hydrophilic and hydrophobic layers. In plain terms, they built a structure that didn't fight the water. It redirected it. The outer clay absorbed rain and spread it evenly, preventing puddles from forming. The waxed fabric underneath acted as a watertight barrier. Between the layers, tiny air pockets trapped warmth, natural insulation that kept the interior toasty in winter and cool in summer. And here's the wild part. When cracks appeared, the next rainfall would cause the clay to swell, and seal them naturally. Modern engineers call that self-healing architecture. Those soldiers just called it survival. British and German engineers tested this sealed earth method after the war. The results were astonishing. These clay and wax shelters stayed completely dry through 4 days of non-stop rain. Today, architects use a version of that same principle in eco-buildings and so-called passive houses. They call it hydrodynamic layering. That's the practice of combining materials that absorb and redirect water with those that repel it. You'll find it in green roofs, earthen homes, and climate-resilient shelters. In other words, the very technology that helped soldiers survive those World War II mudfields now helps modern designers build flood-resistant homes. What began as field improvisation became environmental engineering. That's history's quiet poetry right there. Invention born from desperation. Here's where it gets interesting for survivalists and off-grid builders. You can still use this same method today, and it works beautifully. Start with a flexible frame of green branches bent into a dome. Mix 4 parts clay with 1 part fine ash, or, if you're modernizing, a bit of sand or lime. Spread it as your base layer. Then take any sturdy fabric, an old tarp or canvas, and coat it with melted beeswax, candle wax, or even cooking fat. Lay that on top, then cover it all with another layer of clay mixed with straw or dried grass. Once it dries, you've got a self-sealing, waterproof roof. It's breathable, insulated, and nearly invisible. You can use this for root cellars, outdoor ovens, or emergency field shelters. It's low-tech genius that costs next to nothing. When you step back, it's hard not to feel respect for those soldiers. In a war that celebrated steel, fire and machinery, they turned to mud and found mastery. They proved that survival isn't about what you carry. It's about what you understand. They read the terrain like an old friend, and the earth rewarded them. Some of those clay bunkers still exist today. Over 80 years later, they still shed water, still hold their shape, still whisper that timeless truth. Resilience isn't built in factories. It's time. It's an thing. So, next time you see an old photo of soldiers smiling inside a dry dugout while rain floods everything else, know that what kept them dry wasn't luck or luxury. It was ingenuity, a kind of quiet intelligence that used the very mud that swallowed armies to build shelter. That's the kind of story we live for here at HistoryHQ, where forgotten field hacks meet human brilliance. If you love discovering how survival, science and history collide, don't just scroll past. Hit subscribe, share this with a fellow history buff, and keep digging. Because some of the greatest innovations from World War II aren't in museums. They're buried right beneath our feet, waiting to be rediscovered.